Welcome back to the Athletes Podcast. This is episode 100. If you guys didn't catch that, 100 episodes in. We featured a living legend in Bruce Boudreau, one of hockey's greatest minds. We talked with the Jack Adams winner about his playing career, coaching Ovechkin, being drafted by the Maple Leafs, the changes in athletes he's seen over the generations that he's coached, played in, and how HBO only really wanted him for his comedic skills. These 45 minutes are absolutely incredible. I'm so excited for you folks to tune in, listen, watch wherever you're consuming the Athletes Podcast. We really appreciate it. This is episode 100. Here we go. Bruce Boudreau, welcome to the Athletes Podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. This is an honor, honestly, to be able to chat with you.
Well, thank you. I'm in the Athletes city.
You
St.
are.
Catharines is a great city, so it's good to be here.
Niagara is a hotbed, isn't it?
Well, there's a lot of good athletes have come out of here, and there's, when I was here, at least there's so much going on athletically. I mean, we seem to forget after, the pandemic how vibrant of an athletic area this was. Growing up, when I growing up in Toronto, this was like St. Catharines was the softball kings. Everybody, there was so many softball teams here that were great at any age. So that's what I've always remembered it as.
Gotcha. Well, and
lacrosse. And
lacrosse. And this is where you hosted your hockey camps growing up with Andy, Ben, coaching all the kids. Raven D'Souza as well was out there.
Oh, wow. You know Raven too?
One of my good friends.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. No, she's with us for a long time. I mean, she even visited us in Minnesota when we were there. Yeah. Or Anaheim. I get everything sort of locked in right now. But no, we really liked Raven, and she was with the hockey school for many, many years. Yeah. And hopefully she'll come back when they're going to start up again if there's no pandemic next year. So hopefully it'll work out again.
I think that's her plan. She loves it. She lives for it every year. I promised Neil Barker that I would start off this podcast by asking, how does it feel to be a legend in the hockey world?
Oh my God, I'm not a legend by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I sit back sometimes and realize how lucky I am to have been in the business for, 40 some years, without giving my age away as 33. But that's when you love something that much and it's been your life's work. I mean, it just feels great. But I like doing what I'm doing. I mean, even the little junior team we have now in Hershey gives great joy when you're going on the ice and working with the kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's the passion that you have for the game is obvious. It's incredible to be able to watch. I want to maybe start back from the beginning. You're drafted by your hometown Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
You're from Ontario, where hockey is just socially accepted everywhere. You played growing up as a kid. What was the kind of moment that you realized, hey, I really love this game and I want to play this for the rest of my life?
It was from the beginning. It's hard to believe, but I do remember my dad asking me at a very young age, 5 or 6, what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I said, I want to be a hockey player. And I never varied from that. I never waffled. I never said, geez, you know what, at 11 I might want to be a fireman or this or that. It was always just, I knew I was going to be involved in hockey. Hopefully I was going to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And that was the goal from my longest memory. I don't think I've ever said I wanted to do anything else.
It's incredible to see because not a lot of people nowadays stick to one career path or one goal long term. So kudos to you for being able to do that. I mean, 6 rings to your name, 2 Memorial Cups, a couple Calder Cups. Like, is there anything that when you go through and look back, you're like, man, I wish I had changed one specific thing or gone about things differently? Or I know I've heard you in other podcasts or interviews talk about how you appreciate the fact that everything's led you to this point. Is there anything that's changed?
Yeah, I mean, there was a shift that I put Getzlaff on, and Jonathan Toews scored 2 goals, and that's how they ended up going to the Stanley Cup final. I wish I hadn't put him on that shift, and things might have worked out great, a little bit differently. But you know what? Other than winning the Stanley Cup, you can look back and there's things you did wrong that didn't make you win, but I mean, I wouldn't change my life for that. I mean, I know my ex once told me, she said, you were a good hockey player, but she always thought that I was going to make it in coaching. And I mean, that's the only smart thing I remember that she said. I can't say that. She's from here too.
We like to keep everyone happy here on the Athletes Podcast, women, men included. But you were actually named one of the most dynamic scorers in the AHL in the 1980s. You set a 50-goal season. You had 36 goals, 90 points in your team high in your Calder Cup finals. 82-83 with the St. Catharines Saints, 122 points, 50-goal plateau, hat trick in your final game. Obviously, all of these accolades and accomplishments when you were a player have led to you being able to be such a successful coach. How were you able to apply that from a player's perspective to then coach? Because that's not something that everyone can do.
No, but I think I was a hockey nerd. Like, I mean, one thing when I was with the Leafs or the Marlies or any other teams, I mean, that I just, like, I can't remember anything, but I can remember everything hockey-oriented, which is really stupid. But, I mean, guys used to come to me. If there was a statistic or something, they would always just come to me because that's all I focused on. I mean, once I realized I was going to be a hockey player, school was out the window, everything was out the window, and so I would go through papers, read sports books, watch the sports news, and so I mean, that's all I did. So when I was coming close to the end of my career, I don't even know if this is answering your question. All I wanted to do was how could I continue my career without doing anything else, and so coaching seemed to be the next avenue from playing. And when you're like, I was 37 years old, and I still wanted to play because I had 87 points or something the year before, and figured I could still contribute. And then I got offered a 3-year deal to coach. And when you're in your 30s, or even in minor hockey, if you're over 28 and you have a bad year, that's your last year.
Yeah.
So, and you only get 1-year contracts. So I was sort of just getting lucky that, hey, it's still going, but it was going to end at some point. So when you offered 3 years to coach, you jump at it.
So you're hired by the Capitals. You get that 3-year contract. You go and coach Hershey in Chocolate Town. You win your first season as a coach. How does that stack up in your head? How do you realize you're like, okay, I could actually do this for the rest of my life?
Well, first of all, coaching in Hershey was about my 9th year coaching.
Right. Sorry.
I mean, I started, this year that I was talking about was when I went and coached in Muskegon.
Gotcha.
And had that, and then the next year was Fort Wayne. I mean, there was a lot of trials and tribulations. I mean, we went to the finals in the first year in Fort Wayne, was coach of the year. By Christmas of next year, I was fired. So, I mean, that's the business. That's the way it seems to go. Then I went to San Francisco, and that team folded. And then, geez, I didn't know what I was going to do at that point, and got a job offer in Mississippi to coach. Now, Mississippi's never seen ice, let alone, unless it's in a drink, let alone on a hockey rink. So, but we thought it might be a pretty good adventure, and went down there, and we loved it so much, and we won a championship down there. And that's when I got a chance to go to the NHL with the LA Kings and their farm club in Lowell and Manchester. Yeah. And then when I got let go after 5 years from that, that's when Hershey came.
Right.
And that's where the story would have started.
Right. And Chocolate Town, obviously, you're indoctrinated as a great right away. You bring home a championship. You consume a ton of chocolate, I assume, also.
Well, I gave away a ton of chocolate.
There we go.
That way.
There we go. That's what I like to hear. You got to make sure you maintain for golf season, right?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. I'd love for you to dive into, I heard a story, and you chuckled through it, but in Sherbrooke, you had a medical equipment guy who proceeded to slap a player who was unconscious. Can you dive into that story a bit more?
It's funny. It was Gunnar Garrett. He's from St. Catharines here, and he was a long time trainer. But back in the '80s, early '80s, and you didn't have to have all the medical letters beside your name to be a trainer there, and he had done it already for 20 years. And a player got hurt on the ice, and all that happened is he was sort of unconscious, and so when you're unconscious, he's slapping him on the face like to try to wake him up, and he's going, "Is everything okay? What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?" And he slapped him in the face, and the guy goes, "My jaw's broken." So we're all standing around worried, but we break out laughing because he's just slapping him hard in the face. And that was just, it was a one thing. But Gunnar was great. He was great for me. And, he did this job well into his 70s. So, I mean, he had about a 40-year career of training. So he must have been pretty good at his job.
Yeah, clearly. That's one thing I'd love for you to dive into. Obviously, with 45 plus years in the game of hockey, you've seen a couple generations go through and the different trainings, and you mentioned contracts, how those have changed over the 40, 50 years. Like, can you maybe dive into how you've seen the game change over?
Well, the players now are so much bigger, faster, stronger, and well equipped. I mean, the talent, when I played in the 70s and 80s and 90s, guys were athletic and they were talented, but they weren't in shape the way they are here. They didn't make it a 12-month-a-year deal job type thing. If you were 6 foot, I remember when Doug Riseborough got drafted in 77 or 78, it might have been earlier than that, 75, that he was 5'11", and he was considered a big center.
Wow.
Now you have to be 6'3", 6'4", to even have that. If you were 200 pounds, that was a really good size. Now 200 pounds is pretty well everybody now. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that part is changed. Then all of a sudden the training or the teaching has changed. I mean, we used to, when you were younger, back in those days, is you'd basically play 3 or 4 sports. I mean, you had hockey in the winter, you had baseball, golf, maybe softball or lacrosse in the summer, and then you get back to hockey. Now, at 12 years old, kids start just saying, okay, I'm going to focus on one sport, and they focus on one sport, and they do the training that way. And so, I mean, their training is better. They know more about the game. Kids nowadays, they question you way more than they did back in the day. Like when I was playing, whatever the coach said, I did. Nowadays, you have to give them, you're not playing tonight. Well, why? You have to have answers for them. And that's just the generations that's changed. They don't just, the younger players now don't take what you say verbatim. You have to have a good reason. Well, you're not playing because this guy's better. And I used to have it in my room that everybody's welcome to come in and talk to me. Just be aware that you might not like to hear what you're asking. It's you may have a bone to pick with me, but at the same time, I'm going to tell you the truth. And sometimes you don't want to hear the truth.
Yeah, well, it brings up a good point, because obviously generations go through what it used to be, in the sense that, what the coach said goes. Now for you, you're having to deal with, these 20-year-olds coming in and asking for a reason why they're not starting. Is that maybe a little, frustrating for you?
You know what? It's not frustrating, because we know they want to be the best, and they want to play. Everybody, like when you get to the NHL, okay, from any other league, you're usually or probably one of the best players on your other teams. Or growing up, you were the best player. You were the elite player. And so but when you get and you culminate it with the best players in the world, and you don't get to play right away, and you need time to develop or whatever, it's hard to handle when you've had success your whole life, and now all of a sudden it's not being as successful. So I mean, they question it. Now, the good ones, the ones that end up being really good about it, are the ones that take what you say to heart and go try to fix it. The ones that don't succeed are the ones that say, he's wrong. Let's get rid of the coach. He's an idiot. And they end up finding they have 5 or 6 coaches because they can't find the guy that is going to agree with them. But that's the biggest difference in the generations, I think, is. as far as mentally is that thing. I mean, but you even take a look at the equipment, and we're talking about trainers back then. Back then, you had say you tore your meniscus or something, they would tape you up and say go back out there. And like the equipment, the medical stuff is so advanced right now that what we had, I mean, flimsy shin pads, flimsy gloves, I mean, all of these things to the stuff they have now that is so strong and so lightweight, and I mean, you add that to the size and speed, and that's why the game is so fast and can be very dangerous if you're not paying attention.
It's totally true, especially when you got guys like Ovechkin who are massive human beings running around skating as fast as heck, for lack of a better term. I want to touch on Ovechkin because obviously he's one of the most prolific players you've coached. You talk about his production, longevity. Can you maybe share a story around that guy and how incredible of a hockey player he was?
Well, as a matter of fact, I talked to him Sunday. I mean, he was at the Washington Football Club's game, and him and a buddy, they texted me and wanted me to come down, and I said no, you just stay there, and we get in trouble when we're together. So I mean that didn't happen. But I mean, the stories with him are just basically that when he was younger, he was a guy that was all offense. Like when you come in, you're that skilled, you really have to learn. Every coach wants you to learn the 200-foot game, but he obviously had a little bit more latitude because, I mean, he was so good at what he did, and I remember one game he got cut for 25 stitches on his inseam here, and there was no way he could play, and he didn't skate the next morning, but we were in Ottawa, and he said, "Coach, I play tonight." And I said, "Are you sure?" He'd get the doctor's clearance, and he said, "He say I play." And so he played and went and scored 4 goals, and he could barely move his legs. Like, I mean, when you have athletes like that, they do these things. I mean, you can every tremendous athlete or greatest of all time type athletes in every sport have those kind of stories. I mean, and Alex is no different. I mean, he's 6'2", 235 pounds. He's all muscle. He very rarely gets hurt. His body, I mean, he'll start to pull groins, I think, now. Like, I mean, but his body structurally, like his knees are twice the size of mine. I mean, every time he'd go knee on knee with somebody else would get hurt because he was so much bigger and stronger than everybody else. And I mean, he just has an uncanny release and an uncanny shot. And I mean, if he's going to play at least 5 more years, and I just think he's going to get at least 20 goals a year. Whether he breaks Gretzky's record or not will depend a little bit on his teammates, but I just think he's going to score as long as he wants to play.
Yeah, I was going to ask you whether you think he makes it, but we'll find out in a couple of years, I guess.
A lot of Canadians are hoping not.
Right.
But if you know Alex, he's so determined, and he wants to be the best so badly that it would not surprise me. I don't know how many goals he quite needs right now, but he'll get 35 to 40 this year and maybe the same next year. He might taper down when he gets to be 38, but he's never been one that it took skating for him to score goals.
Right.
He's going to be able to score goals. And I know Washington wants him to have that record, so they will give him every opportunity to break that record.
Good. Well, that's important, and I think it wouldn't surprise me if he gets it. I don't think he'll. It'll be close for sure, but I mean, when you put up 65 goals, you win the Hart at 21. Your coach doesn't expect you to play a whole lot of D, right? And that's kind of what you.
Well, I didn't, and I didn't get it either. I mean, he didn't understand. He was the star of the video so many days, and trying to show him his mistakes. But my philosophy became, and it still is if the good outweighs the bad, you got to let some of it go because that's what makes him him. And I would hate for him to all of a sudden turn into a defensive specialist. I think you'd be not allowing the hockey world to see one of the greatest of all times. But I mean, I had another guy named Steve Kelly, who was the first round pick of Edmonton, but he never really truly made it. But he had his best year with me because he would take slashing penalties all day. But if he became docile and didn't play that kind of game, he wouldn't have got 110 points either in the league, because he had to play that way.
Right.
So the good outweighed the bad. So even though I didn't like what he was doing when he took stupid penalties, I had to accept it, because in the end he was going to probably score the winning goal.
And that's sometimes what it takes. And for you to realize that as a coach is a massive skill, obviously, why you had a tremendous amount of success, end up winning the Jack Adams Coach of the Year. I mean, one other player I want to reference is Ole Kolzig, who I heard you reference his unrivaled work ethic. And as a goalie, I am excited to hear kind of what your thoughts were on his work ethic and how you perceived it.
Well, I mean, when he's 37 years old and he's getting out there half an hour before everybody, and he stays on the ice 40 minutes after, and he's with the goalie coach, and he's always working. I mean, there's somebody that never wants to lose sight of how great he was and wants to stay it that way. I mean, Kolzig was, that's probably why he'll go down as Washington's greatest goalie so far, is because he was good, but he had that work ethic, and I think the two go synonymous with greatness. I mean, if you're a great player, you also work hard and work the hardest. And I thought Daryl Sittler was my best example of that. I mean, he was the first player on the ice when I played and in practice, and he was the last player to leave. As a matter of fact, he gave me, can I say shit?
You can say whatever you want.
But anyway, I got called up, and things were going good for me in Toronto. And I remember practice ending and me leaving the ice, and him running down the lane to the dressing rooms and grabbed me by the scruff of the neck. He says, "Where are you going?" And he said, "I'm the best player. I'm the captain, and I'm on the first guy working on stuff, and I'm the last guy to leave, and I'm working on stuff." And he says, "And you were just getting called up, and you're leaving the ice early? Get your butt back out there and start working." It was something that resonated with me for the rest of my life, and I totally when I got into coaching, I started looking at the same thing on players, and as a player, I never left the ice first, I don't think ever again, but the great ones do that. The great ones they're great for a reason. Not only are they the more skilled, but they've also got the most desire to be the best.
Yeah, I'm so glad you touched on that. Our goal with the Athletes Podcast is to educate and entertain the next generation of athletes, and so much of what you just said there is that education point that should be touched on. Does that now become a superstition for you? Because I heard you might be a little bit of a superstitious
I'm ridiculous. All of those are superstitions. I have so many superstitions that it's... you know what? In the end, Bob Woods would say, they're not superstitions, they're just routine. And but I mean, if we lost, I never walked the same way to the bench. I mean, always, if we won, I had to wear the same tie and eat at the same time. And when I played, I had to do my skates up. I had to listen to the same song before I left. And oh my God, it was ridiculous.
The things you do to, hey, you know what? I can appreciate that, because as a goalie, we get labeled as weird ones, superstitious.
No, and you are. Yeah. So my son Brady's a goaltender, or was a goalie too, and that's why we have goaltending coaches now, and I say you talk to them, because I just don't. I'm not on the same communication wavelength as a goalie. So I mean, you talk to them, and then you talk to me, and you sort of dissect it and give it to me in English.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I feel like we're doing okay here.
I know.
Yeah.
We're not talking goaltending.
This is true. Yeah,
I knew one thing about goaltending. I said, when I saw our goalie, whoever it was, and he was playing great, he was making all kinds of saves. And when he's not playing great, those same shots are going in. And I'd say that's all I knew. When he was good, you make the save. When you're not playing good, you don't make that save. So it was easy for me to decipher whether a guy should be pulled or not. I mean, if you just look at it that way. And I mean, every goalie had their different quirks as to why they weren't playing good or that, or tells is a better word, that when they weren't playing good, and it could happen at the beginning of the game, that they weren't controlling the rebounds, they couldn't catch the puck, it would hit the boards before they reacted to it. All of these are different traits that goalies had that I'd say, oh, he's not on, and then you'd wait till the third goal, and then you'd get to pull him.
Yeah, so how do you, are these just things that you gathered over the years, and you've had kind of a sixth spidey sense of, you could sense that players were off their game? Like, how do you go through? Because that's a difficult thing to do, tapping a guy like Ovi, Getzlaf, whoever it is, on the shoulder and saying, hey, like, you don't got it tonight. Let's get someone else out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think it comes with experience and knowing your teammates. Like, I mean, I only told Ovi that once to sit, by the way, and I got fired a week later, so I'll never do that again. And it's a true story, and it's actually pretty funny because we were losing 5-1 to Anaheim, and going into the third period, and we scored 3 goals to tie it up. Ovi was -5, so he wasn't having
not great stats.
Wasn't having his best time.
Yeah, and
so we pulled the goalie, and all of our games are basically on national TV, and they're covered by everybody. So he asked me, he says, where do I play, coach? And I said, on the bench. And he told me that, the famous F word. And so that was caught on TV. And we ended up tying it up anyway, and we ended up winning it. And he got an assist on the winning goal because I threw him back in overtime. But the whole press conference was about Ovi not playing one shift, and I said, hey, but we tied it up. We did the right thing, and we won the game. It didn't matter. So it just so happened we were playing Anaheim. So the week later, I got fired, okay, after Ovi had Thanksgiving dinner at the owner's house. Just coincidental. But and we've become great friends after that, by the way. But it was Anaheim that watched me bench him. So when I got fired, it was the Anaheim GM that fired me, that hired me the same day, thinking that, oh, what a tough coach, Yeah. So sometimes when one door closes, another one opens for the same reason of what you did. So it was pretty coincidental, and was interesting.
Yeah, and you went on to dominate my Vancouver Canucks for a couple of years over those years while you were playing with that team. It was a good Anaheim team.
Yeah, it was, and that was a bad Vancouver team, so that helped too.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring that up, but she goes, the Winter Classic. What was that like?
That was fun.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Lights, camera, action, the whole night.
Especially when they had 40 F-bombs in about 33 seconds.
They were obviously we're going for the aggressive format in that. Hey?
Well, you know what? It was a perfect storm. I really believe it was by far the best one, the HBO series that we did. And it was, when we started it, we were on a 8-game losing streak. And Pittsburgh was on a 10-game winning streak. So they were portraying them as all the fancily dressed, and we were just the dregs of the earth, and even to a point where they showed Dan Bylsma at home before Christmas having dinner, and they had piped in music, and they were in their suits, and it was like dainty, and then they showed me and my wife, and we're eating spaghetti, and I'm feeding the cat under the table. It was like the winners versus the losers type thing. And then we turned it around, and we ended up winning 14 in a row after and beating them. So it was a great story to tell in there, and the Ovi versus Sydney thing.
Yeah.
But it was a great memory.
Well, and so that was the other thing I wanted to bring up was when you are on the bench, you're always on camera. You're always in view of whoever's watching video recording. There, at any moment, you can be turned into a viral GIF based on your reactions. How do you cope with that?
You saw it.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm bringing it up, right? Does it even bother you?
It doesn't bother me because you're not thinking about what the people are thinking. You're thinking about what's going on at the time.
Yeah.
And that's all I was caring about. If I had stopped and said, "Oh, the camera's on me. I can't say that." Heck, or damn. That one word's damn, or you see me going, fuck. You know, like, I mean, you know, then it wouldn't have been me. So I just have to be me.
You are now one of the only father-son duo between you and Ben to have won an ECHL, actually the same pro hockey championship.
Yeah.
Can you explain how that makes you feel?
Oh, it's incredibly proud and incredibly argumentative when I'm with Ben. Because he said he did it in his second year.
Right.
And I said, yeah, but you only played 50 games and, you know, you only had 3 out of 5 playoffs, not 4 out of 7. So, I mean, we have great arguments about it, and but incredibly proud of him for doing what he did because no one gave them a chance. They were a good team, but the hardships that they had to overcome were an awful lot more than the hardships that we had to overcome to win. And, I mean, our biggest hardship is we won it, and we were down 3-1, and we won it in the 7th game in triple overtime. Ben, they had to play 5 games in 6 nights, and they had to travel by bus 17 hours in between the one off day. And I mean, it was like I don't know how he got the players to respond, to want to play after their ownership were so cheap, quite frankly, and played 5 games in 6 nights, and with a roster quite that was, you know, injured and sick, and they could only use one goalie. So I mean, it was quite a feat that I think he did. So I'll give him the kudos because he's my boy.
Yeah, there we go. He deserves it. Mm-hmm. That goalie Dylan Ferguson's actually my buddy. He was episode 28. I grew up playing with him. So
oh really?
Small world there.
Good for him. Yeah, he played great for them in the playoffs.
He's a stud. I believe I'm probably going to get it wrong, but playing minor hockey, he won some ridiculous number, like 50 straight games as a attendee. It was incredible. Besides the point, can you maybe give us, like, if you were to start an NHL franchise right now,
yeah,
who would your first pick be?
I got to believe that's pretty easy pick.
I figured, but you know what? There's always room for discussion, you know?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I would have Freddie Anderson.
Is that because 2 years ago you were almost signed to coach for the Leafs?
No,
Is there a little bias there?
No. I'm kidding. I think everybody knows it would be Connor McDavid and would be number 1. And then number 2, there's so many great players that are close together of being great. But Connor McDavid stands above the crowd unless you're looking at Nathan McKinnon, who, you know, for a team that was in the same division, gave me fits for years, and I think he's so good. Like, I mean, he doesn't get the press. Hockey doesn't get the press in the States that it does in Canada. So McDavid being Canadian, and is gets so much more press. But if you had switched them around and had McKinnon in Edmonton and McDavid in Colorado, there'd be a lot of people talking about how great Nathan McKinnon is. But Connor McDavid, coaching him and being on the bench watching him, when he puts it in gear, there's nothing like that. I mean, it's fun to watch.
It's pretty incredible. He's like hands above everyone. Joe Quinn, Pep Hockey, is actually a good friend of mine, so he's been training him for forever, and he just said even he could tell at such a young age that Connor was special and has some incredible future ahead of him. I'd love for you to share, because you're now in an analyst role with the NHL Network, doing more cameras, lights, action like we have here set up here, but over the past 45 years of your experience, my buddy Noah Gorin and I were chatting. He's in the Montreal organization as a media guy, but he wants to know, kind of, with your experience in pro hockey, what the biggest misconception of the sport is. This is something we bring up on the podcast frequently, as far as, you know, when you get to that professional level, whether it's as a coach, athlete, whatever it is there something that you grew up as a kid and you're like, oh, this is very different now?
No, well, I mean, if playing in the States, when you start off in my first couple of years, I was in the South, nobody thought fighting was real. So there's a misconception right there. They thought it was all staged. It was like WWE.
Wow.
I mean, And no, we'd say you get out there and take a punch to the face. It's as real as it gets. So that was always a misconception. I don't know. I mean, there's not a, you see what you see is what it is. There's not a lot of misconceptions. Hockey people are genuinely the nicest. I think people in the sports world. They're the most approachable. And I think it comes from most hockey players are from middle income families that do it, and when they just travel to, like in basketball you can send your kid to the playground and he can play. In hockey you got to usually drive him to a rink, and it's an expensive sport, so you stay and watch and everything else. And so I think the hockey players are more appreciative of where they are in their lot in life than other sports.
You've got a series with the Anaheim Ducks that's called Bruce Boudreau Uncensored. Well, kind of.
Really?
Yeah, you had a couple episodes up on YouTube there that I found.
I don't really want to know about them.
Well, you're no stranger to the camera. I heard about one game where you may have forgotten an article of clothing.
That was in Bridgeport. I mean, that was in the American League.
Okay.
And that was, quite frankly, it was Christmas, the day after Christmas, Boxing Day. And so Bridgeport's a 4-hour drive from Hershey at the time. And my wife would get my clothes ready, and we would wear sweats on the bus, but once we got into the room, we had to, change into our suit for the game. And this one game, like much to my chagrin, I looked at it and I go, oh my God, we don't have any pants. Well, she forgot to put my pants in there. And so after we were done laughing and got the big laugh, how are we going to do this? So we dismissed the fact that, okay, let's wear our sweats out there. We didn't want to do that. And so the only person that wore pants, well, our general manager was only 5'5". I couldn't wear his pants. Was John Walton, who's now the broadcaster for the Caps. He had pants, but like, I don't know if you've seen me lately, but I'm not a 32 waist, and that's what he had. So
33, right? Just like your age.
Yeah. So I had to suck it in, and I think two guys got the buttons and everything pulled up like this. But I walked like. Have you ever seen the Seinfeld episode where Frasier tries to get into those tight jeans? Where if you ever YouTube it up there,
we'll bring it up. Jordan will put it right here.
And like, I mean, I was walking stiff-legged, couldn't move, couldn't sit down, and I never moved 1 inch from the bench the whole time. And Bob Woods helped me across the ice and off the ice, but I had the pants on, and it was we had the funniest laugh, and but I always said after that I'm a 32 waist, so it was good.
That's what I'll go with here moving forward. Mr. Boudreau, we could talk for hours. I could pick your brain about hockey forever. You are a living legend when it comes to the hockey world. The question we wrap up every episode with is, we ask our guests what their biggest piece of advice would be for the next generation of athletes, and I'd love for you, with your experience.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think the off the top of my head, the best advice I can give is the same advice you'd give if it was 30 years ago and 40 years ago. Follow your dream. Don't give up on your dream. And if you want something bad enough and you put the work in, usually good things happen. I mean, a lot of time people want things, but they want them, they don't go after them. And I think if you want to fulfill your dream, you got to usually look at the person that you're competing against and work harder than him, and and do things not just the skill wise, but I mean in life alone. I mean, if you work harder and work longer and do the right things, you're usually going to become successful. So, but don't give up on the dream. I mean, if I had given up on my dream to coach in the NHL, I was 53 years old when I got the chance, and you run with it, but it could have been over a long time earlier if I didn't believe in myself. So, I mean, never give up, and good things will happen.
I really appreciate your time. Sincerely, thank you so much for coming in, making the trip to St. Catharines for our 100th episode in-person podcast. Thank you very much again, Mr. Boudreau.
No, it was great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, folks, for tuning into the 100th episode of the Athletes Podcast. If you've been along for the journey, thank you so much. If you're just joining us, thank you as well, because this is just the beginning. We featured an incredible human being in Bruce Boudreau on this 100th episode. He talked so much about his insights, his wisdom. I can't thank him enough for coming on the show, and can't thank you folks enough again for watching, listening, wherever you're consuming. Hit that like, subscribe button. It really makes a huge difference for us. Takes a couple seconds out of your day, and we really appreciate it. Jordan Maslin is our producer. Ian Singleton is our videographer. My name's David Stark. Thank you folks for tuning in. Bye.